Show with your host, Peter Mingles.
Hello, everyone. Peter Mingles here. You are listening to us live on Building Fortunes Radio. It's www.buildingfortunesradio.com. For those people that might be listening to my voice, my last name is Mingles. For those people that want to try to spell it the right way and not tie me into a dating service, it's spelled Mingils, yes. So that's what happens sometimes. People think that I am part of a mingling kind of a service, like a dating service, and that's kind of a funny story, but sadly, it's true. So the reality is just because you think you know how to spell my name, you don't. So anyway, so it's Mingils for those people that are looking. But not you, Tanster, not you. Don't worry about you. I'm talking about
I had it wrong.
You did, but that's okay. That's okay. Good for you.
I had to go back and correct it.
Woo-hoo! All right. Anyway, so the reason why we're here is for those people listening in, if you want to hear us live, you go to buildingfortunesradio.com/live at the appropriate time when we're doing live radio shows, which is now. And if you go there any Saturday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, we hear on this radio show with a great friend of ours. His name is Scott Johnson. Now, Scott and I are very passionate about the messages that we have about MLM or anti-MLM or the things that we talk about over here, because we really want to make sure that people don't get hurt. So I did a radio show many years ago with a gentleman whose name is Roger Van Vlissingen. And Roger's a critic of MLM. He writes for the seekingalpha.com website and probably other things as well, and is overall a good guy and very smart. And he was writing some scathing things about MLM, so when I spoke about that to him, I said, hey, Roger, you make some very interesting points. Would you like to be a guest on our radio show? He said, sure, hesitantly, because he thought it may be a trap. Like get the guy on and then we beat him up. I said, no, I just want you to bring up the very interesting points that he had, which he did, and then Scott Johnson must have listened in one way or another. And then Scott did what most people don't. Scott picked up the phone and they called me. And when he called me, he said, hey, listen, there's some things going on that weren't really discussed on that radio show that most people overlook, and that's the idea of the tools scam. Now, because I was in the industry and because I had hired and fired myself 3 times in Amway because of the tools scam specifically, I knew what he was talking about. And it was the idea that not that tools or profits from tools is a bad thing. I think it's a wonderful thing. If you write a good book and lots of people buy it, you deserve the profits. I mean, you had to write the book. If you make a great audio cassette, which was way back then, and people really love it and they're using it to effectively build their business, I think you're supposed to make profits from that. So I'm okay with that. It's the non-disclosure of those profits, or it's the, I don't want to say this the wrong way, like the delusion or the deception or the misplacement of the story to the deception of other people, maybe like a magician would pull a quarter from behind your ear. It's that lack of disclosure that I had a problem with. So Scott and I really hit it off when we were figuring we were going to do a couple of radio shows, talk about the tools. And then one thing led to another, and I found that Scott Johnson, his name is easy to spell. Maybe common, but it's easy to spell. So Scott Johnson really knows a lot about this industry and shares the same passion that I do as far as, I think MLM can be done the right way. I think Scott has no problem with MLM done the right way. It's when it's done the wrong way that we're here to try to educate and do our version of trying to protect, if you will, those people that want to listen. Now, if they don't want to listen, I'm okay with that. Adult, people, they can do their own things, make their own decisions, and all that sort of stuff. But I wanted to try to at least show where the potholes and the pitfalls are. So we have Scott Johnson. He has a couple of great websites. StopTheAmwayToolScam.wordpress.com is one of them. There's another one called AllMLMFacts.org is another one. And this is where he documents a lot of the stuff that happened in the industry. And we figured one of the best ways to be able to educate some of the people that might be listening in an educational and also a fun way would be to host this radio show on Building Fortunes Radio. So if you go to buildingfortunesradio.com/Scott Johnson, you'll be able to hear the previous radio shows that we've done. And although some of the stories we might talk about might have already happened, the lessons that are learned are really excellent lessons, in my humble opinion, about what happens in the MLM world. Now, these are our opinions. These are based on maybe the facts that we've researched, the conclusions that we've drawn. It doesn't constitute, what they say, legal advice or whatever advice. You make up your own mind. Listen to this for entertainment and educational purposes only, or, do whatever you want to do with this. But the reality is at least you were told. So we've been kind of doing different things, bringing different and various guests on. And I want to introduce Scott, and then we have Tanster, who's the woman who you hear in the background. We have Tanster coming back, giving us some updates on what we spoke about last week. And Tanster is a very unique individual with probably a squeaky puppy dog somewhere in the back, which is kind of cool.
I do. I have 4 little Pomeranians.
There you go. So
but
I
do have a guard on duty for Pomeranian removal should that become necessary.
Oh, okay, that's not an issue. First of all, we like it, the idea that we do radio shows. You're fine. You're fine. It
Okay.
just shows you they're enthusiastic about at least being your pet. So the cool thing about it is I'm going to let Scott introduce Tanster, and we're going to have some fun on this radio show as we blend a little bit about the continuation of last week as well as more stuff that's happening in the industry this week. So, Scott Johnson, thanks for being here.
Peter, thanks for having me again, and you're right on. If MLM is done right, I'm a huge believer and supporter. Unfortunately, I believe most MLMs, or at least most people in most MLMs, are not doing it right. In other words, they don't have lots of retail sales to non-distributors. Most people call those customers. But I just wanted to be clear on that because a lot of MLMers consider their downline to be customers, and in a way they are. They're customers of the MLM company because they're buying their products, but that's not the legal definition in the MLM environment for a customer. A customer is a non-distributor. And by the way, I think we've heard all 3 of our dogs before, so don't worry about it, Tanster. They've all been on the air in the past, so it's no big deal. So the lack of retail sales is the one thing which makes it an illegal pyramid, and where the FTC has kind of drawn the line. It's kind of fuzzy. It's certainly not federal law, but it's sort of the guideline that the FTC has gone on over the years. Is you got to have at least as many sales to customers as you do your internal consumption. So that's kind of a good thumb rule to use as far as whether an MLM is legitimate or it's an illegal pyramid. And the other thing is the thing you mentioned, Peter. I don't mind people making profit on tools, but they got to admit it. They got to say, hey, look at my mansion, look at my yacht, look at my jet airplane, look at my luxury car, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But then you also need to say, most of my lifestyle actually came from the tools, and that's what people in Amway do not do. They pretend that it came from the Amway products and their downline and so forth, but in fact it came from the tools. And you'll see specific examples of actual people that were making that kind of money when they were in Amway, and then when they got kicked out or quit or whatever the specifics were, then they came clean and said, oh yeah, I made 10 times as much from tools as I did from Amway. And so you know what the truth is,
right.
and you can figure it out if you do some calculations. I believe this is our first repeat guest, Peter. Is that
oh my
your memory
goodness.
on this?
I can't.
I think we've scared off all the other ones.
I don't know about that. I think they would come back.
I think they would come back too. But I am honored to have Tanster. And the website I believe is thetanster.com. Is that correct?
That is totally correct.
Yeah, so it's TANSTER, thetanster.com. She's got a great website, and we've got her back here. She was only here last week, but we've got her back here, and it's great because I wanted to get an update on what's going on with Ben Szemkus. And let me give just some real quick background. This is a story of NXIVM, which is spelled NXIVM. It's kind of a personal growth MLM that went really weird. And if you want to read all about it, I recommend you go to frankreport.com, and you can spend hours, if not days, reading about different facets of this situation with NXIVM. Essentially, the big picture is the founder was put in jail a few months ago, along with an actress by the name of Allison Mack, who was in Smallville. And there's a lot of other people that are probably going to be indicted, including Claire Bronfman, who is the heir to the Seagram's booze fortune. Her father passed away just a few years ago, before declaring that he thought his daughters were entering a cult of NXIVM. And so this whole thing is now really blown up, and we got 2 people in jail. A bunch of other people are facing indictments in the near future. And about a month or so ago, a fellow by the name of Ben Szemkus stepped forward, and he goes, "You know what? I was watching this Smallville series and looking at the NXIVM stuff, and this memory came flooding back into my mind. Back in 2007, I was at a party in Connecticut, right next to where Yale, University Yale is located, and they had a bunch of Yale students, and there was the various NXIVM people, and then there were various other people such as Anthony Weiner, Stormy Daniels, who else was it, Tanster? Trying to think of names here.
Huma Abedin, the Brockman sisters, Lauren Salzman, who was like, the whole thing was under her name, Lauren Salzman.
Right, because Keith, and keep in mind that Keith Raniere, who was the founder... the Nazi doctor. Yeah, Brandon something or other.
Brandon Porter, Dr. Brandon Porter.
Yeah, he just had a hearing this past week.
Ben thinks he saw him too. He's not sure. But he thinks Dr. Brandon Porter was there, but he's not sure.
Yeah, and the doctor just had a hearing this past week with some kind of medical board to hear both sides, and I don't think we're going to hear anything for at least months about the outcome of that. I would say at least weeks, if not months, for them to make a decision, because I think there's more hearings scheduled, and this is a long process. It's not a thumbs up, thumbs down right afterwards. But he was accused of putting women through some horrific experiences. He would basically sit them down in front of a monitor or whatever, and put in movies of people being, cut up and decapitated and just really gross stuff, and then measuring, different bodily parameters, I guess. And he thought that was research. And so, but there was another thing that happened too this past week with Ben Szemkus and Tanster. I'm going to let you take that and run with it.
Oh my goodness! So Ben, okay, I'm going to dial it back for a second and let you know that I'm doing this really weird project, and it is 100% for truth. So if anybody ever picks up my project, they have to interact with it, because it's so far to one end, to truth, that the reaction that somebody has is a complete indication of who they are, okay? So I'm putting rainbow art out on the street. I think I told you this last week. Some people like it, some people can't see it.
Hold on one second. For whatever reason, I think the gal is saying we only have 90 seconds left. That's not true. So we're going to keep going, so don't worry about that. I don't know what happened. They must have not recorded. You'll hear that. I just wanted to let you guys know that we're still live, and don't worry about any of that stuff. So keep going.
Well, okay. Okay. So what I realized is how someone reacted to a person putting out free rainbow art said a lot about who they really are. Okay? So I almost saw my project as some sort of truth creature. So when I found Ben, who was somebody who was like so willing to stand up for the truth, to even risk his own life, to talk about all these politicians that were at a sex slaver cult mixer recruitment, and this is big stuff. So I thought, wow, I want to get him on my project. So, like, the truth of Ben could expose all these people. And a lot of people in the quote-unquote truth community on YouTube are being exposed as basically disinformation agents, because you can see that they are actively repressing Ben's story. We have shown over and over and over again that Ben's story is true, because every time he tells it, all of the facts agree. And we're saying that's enough. If he can tell this story like 5 times and all the facts do not change at all, everybody has to admit that that's true. And then all these people are saying, well, we still don't believe it. We'll never believe it. There's nothing he can ever do to make us believe it. So Ben is saying, well, I'll take a polygraph. And they're like, but polygraphs are no good. We won't believe a polygraph either. Anyway, so we are setting up a polygraph for Ben.
Yeah, that's great. And I believe you volunteered to pay for it, right, Tanster?
Yes.
Yeah, because I actually went on frankreport.com, and I've done it at least twice, where I said, hey, you guys that are complaining and you're saying Ben's a liar, why don't you give a few bucks, $5 or $10, give it to Frank. We can trust Frank Parlato that runs the website, and let him put some money together and go pay for it. But you don't get any response when you do that, and so they like to talk.
Oh, definitely not,
because take any action.
But see, I think it's very interesting that everybody is trying to invalidate the polygraph as if he hasn't told his story over and over and over again. I know every detail about this NXIVM mixer because I've listened to him talk so much about it. Nothing ever changes in his stories. So, and then the people are like, well, a polygraph is not credible because they're all assuming he's going to pass it. And then they're going to say, polygraphs are incredible. Polygraphs are real.
Yeah, I think in most places, unless both sides agree to introduce polygraph results, they're not normally admissible. But that doesn't mean that they're completely useless. That just means
they're not useless. And all these people that are saying polygraphs are useless are just people who want to discredit Ben. So the fact that so many people want Ben to shut up, to me, that's the story. Why do all these people want Ben to shut up? And all these people in the truth community do not want to cover this story. Not only do they not want to cover this story, this week, a big truther on YouTube had Omar Rosales on his show, who's the guy on the internet who's constantly, viciously, personally attacking Ben for having the courage to tell his story.
Yeah, and people need to know who Omar is. Omar is a lawyer who, for the next 3 years, is not allowed to practice law, and he owes a $175,000 fine because he was going around to different businesses and being really ticky-tacky on their ADA, American Disability Act. Because if you have a business, you're supposed to make accommodations for people that have problems getting around physically and so forth. And so he would go around and find these really nitpicky things and say, unless you fix that right now, I'm going to sue you. And the only way to stop the lawsuit is to pay me $2,000. And, of course,
right.
People know that a lawsuit is going to cost them more than $2,000, so they pay it. So he got hammered by the Texas State Board. You can look this up. It's on the Internet. That's what's so wonderful. You don't have to believe me. Just Google Omar Rosales. It's, Omar, O-M-A-R, and then Rosales is R-O-S-A-L-E-S, Rosales, and put in Omar Rosales, Austin. That's where he's in, Austin, Texas. And you'll see it. It's in the, newspaper websites. It's all very well documented. It's not just some guy making up a story. Now, Omar also wrote a book about NXIVM, and he's written other books in the past. I guess he did go to some NXIVM classes at one time, so he's somewhat familiar. But he's the guy that said NXIVM has never been to Connecticut, ever. And I asked him, this was on Frank Report, we were making comments, I asked him,
he just
how
lied.
do you know that?
But he has no credibility. Nobody
he has
can
no
believe
credibility.
a word he says.
No, he's a dirtbag.
No credibility. So he can say whatever he wants, and he lies. And he lies about Ben.
Yeah, he's a dirtbag. So, instead of saying they've never been to Connecticut, and of course he doesn't respond to me when I challenge him, and I say, well, how do you know they've never been to Connecticut? How do you know that? How can you make that statement that they've never been there unless you can prove they've never been there? And, of course, it goes silent at that point, and he does not respond back. So that's the kind of characters we're talking about, just to give people an idea of what's going on. And what we wanted to do, Peter, was, because we know this is an MLM audience, how does this how does this cross over to MLM? Because people are going, well, this is an interesting story, maybe, or maybe not. They're thinking that.
Okay, I can tell you very easily what the common denominator is.
Go right ahead.
Are you ready? Are you ready, Scott?
Go for it.
It's coming. I'm like gearing up to say it. It's a group that tells people they'll get whatever they want as long as they take their classes. It's all some form of that. And, you know, I come out of a cult situation, too. And that applies to the cult situation that I got stuck in. So this person, through hypnosis, black magic, all kinds of weird, funky stuff, got me totally hypnotized, like, in love with him. And I was like, what's happening to me? It was like in a movie where, like, somebody puts a spell on somebody. So now I'm in this spell where I think that he's, like, my other half, which thousands of women, according to him, have somehow independently come to this conclusion that they're his other half. He's this ugly little guy from Afghanistan, okay? I'm serious. Yep. Anyway, he really is, exactly. Though. He's an ugly little guy. And he's thousands of women who think that, like, he's the one. So that's the same thing with Keith Raniere, and then that's the same thing with cults. Because cults are like, you like your new family, right? Don't listen to those stupid people that call themselves your family. Your real family's us, and we love you. And all we want from you is a couple more classes. And if you just do a couple more classes, you are going to get everything you ever wanted.
Right. And what they're doing there is saying, get your information from us. Don't listen to them.
Yep.
Them being anybody other than the cult or the MLM or, you know, whatever group it is. And so we're just encouraging people, if you're looking at an MLM, don't believe that. You know, don't believe that you can only get good information from the people inside, particularly if they're trying to take advantage of you. Go on the internet. It's a powerful tool that when I was a young man, it didn't exist. Now I'm older, it does exist, and it's incredible. The information out there is incredible. And,
it's amazing.
And don't believe the first anti-MLM thing you hear either. But, you know, check out several sources. Look for patterns. Look for consistencies. You know, look for things that fit together, and make your decision. Yeah. But at least now you've been told, don't just listen to the people that say, don't listen to anybody else. Just listen to me. Go out there and look around.
That's the cult.
Yeah, look around for input. Exactly.
Right, they're all the same. It's just from us. Don't go anywhere else. Just us. That's what they all have in common. And they're selling classes. Basically, their bread and butter is the classes.
Yeah, and they're not giving away these classes either.
Right, and then when the people are in the classes, they get hypnotized, and you know, lied to, deceived. They're deceived. They start to believe these lies that they're told. And like I said, the bread and butter is classes.
Yeah, and in the MLM space, the big lies are, they don't tell you that they're an illegal pyramid because they don't have hardly any retail sales. And who would say that, right? I mean, it's ridiculous to think you're going to be promoting something illegal and then tell somebody that it's illegal. So they're going to just, you know, lie by omission and not mention that fact. And they're also not going to tell you that the people at the top make most of the money from the tools. They're just not going to do it because it's not in their best interest. So it's lies of commission and omission, but the bottom line is, get your information from us. Don't get it from anybody else. That's really the common denominator.
Exactly. And religion's like that, too.
Yeah. And Peter, did you have anything?
Don't to the other people, just us.
Yeah, Peter, do you have anything else to add to that point?
So these are all good points. They're delicate lines or they're delicate balances between compliance and duplication and things like that. So it's really in the mind of the person who is trying to receive this information to be able to filter out which is the good stuff and which is the bad stuff. So let's just use like one example. So in the example, let's use a good example. If the people that are in a nutrition company are being told that you can't make medical claims by the people that are in the compliance department, they're talking about things like you can't say it does this, you can't say it does this, you can't say it does this, then that would be is like, well, the guys up on top are telling the guys down on the bottom what they can and can't say. That's totally legit. That would happen in any legitimate company. It's when the lines are blurred, and when it's kind of like, no, you have to be, the sociopathic, power-hungry, greedy, if you will, power-controlling type of individuals that like, no, we have to do it this way, or you have to buy this system, or you have to do whatever, where there really isn't that same legitimate reason for why you should listen to your upline leadership or your company. So a lot of because in our industry, it's so so many people want to be coachable. They want to be duplicatable. They fall then susceptible to people who are going to manipulate them. So what the Tanster is mentioning is the manipulation. So what Scott's mentioning about the tools and what I mention sometimes about, this self-development stuff, these are all forms of manipulation that are actually manipulating individuals as opposed to legitimate reasons why you would need to listen to your company or your upline. So the mark of the experienced person would be to filter that information they're getting in and figure that stuff out for themselves. Now let me throw back some comments back to some of the things that Tanster mentioned a little bit earlier. I don't know anything about Ben. To me, I'm guessing that Ben is telling mostly the true story. The truth is as best as it is for him. And that he tells the story the same time 5 or 6, 7, 100 times doesn't by itself mean that it's true. He seems like a nice guy. He seems like he has no incentive at all. He's not looking to raise money, sell a book, come to my movie, blah, blah, blah. He's just talking about some of the things that happened at the event. To me, the things that are really most interesting about this is it adds a little bit more drama to the NXIVM story. So it's the drama portion of it that I think sometimes gets some attention. The idea that this guy started off as an Amway distributor, decided to do his own network marketing company, was shut down basically because of that, then decided to get into this sex cult, and over time became so perverse and perverted, it's to the extreme. So that's part one of this concept, and the idea of self-development, and actually to the extreme of branding women towards the end, just nuts. Here's the other part that I think that's going to be interesting. If these people that he's referencing were associated with this organization early on and had a tendency of sticking with this organization early on, this thing has roots that are deeper than like a molar, if you know what I mean. When you're trying to get a tooth extracted and it's like one of those, this is where
horrific.
It gets
it's horrifying.
Yeah, even where it's even more interesting, because now you're talking about political people that are into these types of things, people with real money, like the Seagram's heiresses. These are people with real money. The people like the Uma Abedin. These are people that had real influence with real people. Were, Schneiderman. Some of the other people that were mentioned. Like Wiener, Eric Wiener, everybody knew, like, you just look at the guy and just say, this guy's like freak. What does she ever see in him? Yeah. But it's the other things that I think are like, wait a minute, if these people were part of this, then this gets even weirder. And I think that's one of the reasons why they're squashing Ben, because if they don't squash Ben, then some of these things might open up like Pandora's box. So I think that there's probably a reason for Ben to be kind of discredited early, as opposed to this thing to take any kind of traction.
Now back to all efforts have been made to discredit Ben early.
Right. Now
we are documenting that. We are absolutely, that's part of the story I'm telling at thetanster.com.
Yep.
See,
now,
the point is that...
Go ahead, Tanster. No, go ahead. You finish.
Well, I'm not happy with how the world is right now, and I'm an artist. And, everybody says, like, what can I do? Like, what can I do that this is going on? And we all know that some really bad stuff is going on, So people are just like, I feel so helpless. I don't, how... I don't want to go along with it. I don't agree with it, but, like, what choice do I have? So the idea is that I tried to form this project to model something, okay? And when I started this project in September 2014, everything on the phone was selfies, and here's my cupcake, and I'm at the airport, and I'm super fabulous. Like, it was very narcissistic and gross. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do an art project that's the complete opposite of that. Like, you don't really see me. All I'm doing is giving things away. Okay? So the idea was, like, kind of to wake people up with rainbows.
Makes sense to me. Now, I like the idea that you have really, you did not know Ben before he came up with the story. So you're someone who's saying, you know what, you're a total stranger originally. I'm going to stick up for you.
Can I tell you another story?
Sure, but hold on, let me finish my one point. Relative to the lie detector test, you're taking an action. I don't know how much lie detector tests cost today, but I'm guessing it's a few $100s, right? So, but you're actually taking a stand and making and putting yourself out there too for the criticism to give an opportunity to let him tell a story. Now, if my personal opinion about lie detector tests is, they don't or may not hold up in court, but this is in court. So he's either going to positively pass it, like overwhelmingly, or he's going to completely blow it and be exposed, or maybe somewhere in between. So it's the next level.
Exactly.
But at least what it is, it's you as an outside individual that didn't know him before that's taking a chance to say, well, I believe in you. I'm making a stance. I'm doing something, and that's what I really appreciate about what you're doing. So anyway, so back to you.
Thank you.
Now it's time for you to tell your story. You had another story.
What part of it? Oh, this is the other story. Okay, fine. Okay, so the YouTube truth community, I'm talking about all the people that make videos on YouTube purporting to be truthers, and a lot of them maybe pretend to be Christians too, because a lot of the truthers are very Christian, okay? So there's all these people that are actually disinformation agents, like Alex Jones. I know I'm making some big allegations, and maybe I'm totally wrong, but most of the people you'll find in the truth community on YouTube are actually like shills, and they're playing characters. Just like the TV is full of like fake stuff, the YouTube's also full of fake stuff. And that's how they try to keep us from finding the truth, because it's like so flooded with garbage that you'll get stuck with these, insincere people. And then within the framework of that, there's a couple of us down at the bottom who really actually care about the truth. So it's like real truthers are trying to infiltrate the fake truth community on YouTube. And obviously, we get attacked in every way because the entire architecture of the internet favors them. Okay? So I'm looking around. This is my agenda. I see this guy on the channel of somebody called Random Rants of Ryan. And in the comments, Ben was saying, I went to this NXIVM mixer with Stormy Daniels and, Huma Abedin and whatever. And I was like, please talk to me. Okay? And then it was interesting that guy who Ben had approached had no interest in reporting on this. And that guy purports to be a Pizzagate researcher. I know a lot of people don't know what that is. And he purports to be against the pedophiles. And yet, he has no interest in broadcasting anything from Ben. So I did everything I could to bring Ben's story out. And then the meanest person we ever could possibly meet showed up on the internet, okay? And he came on my page under the name Omar Rosales. Meanest guy you could possibly imagine. Very, evil to Ben, okay? And Ben is like, what is Ben doing to be evil to him about? Okay, so there's that. And then next thing, Random Rants of Ryan had that guy on who was attacking Ben, the meanest guy for this whole process. And that guy is, and he was promoting a book that Omar had written about shamanism, which is really witch doctors, okay? So he's pretending to be against the Satanism and the pedophiles, this Random Rants of Ryan, but he has on a guy to promote his, witchcraft book. Okay, so it makes no sense. So then we went in the comments of Random Rants of Ryan, and we were like, this guy totally is against Ben telling his story. And then he came back to me, Random Rants of Brian. He said if you did a 1-minute Google search, you would see that was turned over and he was all cleared. So I did a 1-minute Google search, and that is completely not true. So that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
everybody's showing their true colors.
Yeah, there was one case that Omar won, but there's at least 2 new cases. In fact, one of them has already been decided, and one of them is in process.
Exactly.
What I mentioned earlier, when he got suspended for 3 years and a $175,000 fine, that was actually appealed, and he lost on appeal. So, that one's a slam dunk. But he's also being investigated by the state bar because he wiggled out of an earlier thing with the state bar based on free speech or something. In Texas, Texas does have a very strong. Texas has a very strong anti-SLAPP law, and he used that law. I wish I could have used it against Amway when they sued me, but it didn't exist back then. So I would have loved to have used it, but it wasn't in force yet. So yeah, there's to me, when people make these immediate judgments, you just don't know. You don't have enough information. So keep asking questions, digging in, trying to find more input. Go take a polygraph. Go do everything you can to either prove the story's true or prove the story's false, but don't just fly off the handle and say he's got to be telling the truth or he's got to be lying because you don't have enough information. And that's what I appreciate about you, because you're going for the truth and you're exposing these people that claim to be truthers and they're anything but. They just have some kind of an agenda, and they don't care about the truth. They just care about their agenda.
I know. Why is that guy pretending to be about the truth to people on YouTube? Okay, because if he was about the truth, he was covering NXIVM. He's been covering NXIVM the whole time. Okay, so it's not like it's not his subject. So me and Ben were like, wow, that guy really doesn't want you on, does he? Me and Ben talk about it. We're like always shill spotting. Like, wow, that guy doesn't care about the truth at all. And then we were watching him, and then it's like, Ben sends me this, like, oh, he's interviewing Omar Rosales about his alleged witchcraft book.
Right. Yeah.
Was I true in the assumption, because I made a basic assumption that you did not know Ben Szemkus before this whole scenario. Is that a true statement?
No, I found him in the comments of Ryan, who I'm talking about.
Right, okay, but that's what I mean. You didn't know who he was. You didn't have a relationship with this guy. You didn't know who he was. He was a stranger to you first before all this stuff started showing up.
Right, he was trying to get Ryan's attention. Right. Ben was trying to get Ryan's attention because Ryan purports to cover this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it was such a perfect connection for Ben to make. Because this is exactly what Ryan does.
And I know you say his name so fast, or that Ryan, whatever, I think there's like 3 words. What are those 3 words that sling together his name or his identity?
Okay. His channel on YouTube is called Random Rants of Ryan.
Random Rant of Ryan?
Of Ryan.
I think it's rants, plural, R-A-N-T-S, Random Rants of Ryan, right?
That's it.
Got it.
That's it.
Okay.
And that kind of tells you the whole story right there. If the guy calls himself a random ranter, then how much should you really even believe him about anything, if that's the title of his show?
Right, he's like already giving himself away. But he doesn't act like that, you know what I'm saying? Maybe his channel is like giving it away, but he's telling people that he really cares about this stuff,
Right.
If he really cared about exposing the pedophiles, he would want to talk to Ben, clearly.
And by the way, this also ties in. This is not a direct tie-in, but Peter, I think I sent you a link earlier this week about a Facebook page. There was these anti-MLMers on Facebook. Elbow. Yes. And apparently they being Facebook got complaints and they took down this Facebook page. So there's things that are trying to get done, and if you're a Facebook or a Twitter or one of these big social media companies, and typically they're left-leaning, they're liberal-leaning, and typically they will squash out any kind of conservative input. In this case, it's not really even conservative or liberal. It's just, hey, we had this experience with an MLM, and it was really bad, and we're trying to help other people not have that same experience. And they think what happened was all of these MLM supporters just flooded Facebook with complaints, and Facebook took it down. And so all of this is going on in social media, too, as far as who's even allowed to be seen. And that's why it's good to have your own website. I have a couple websites. Tanster has her own website, and we get to control the content. And I don't control it. I let anybody post anything they want as long as it's consistent with my settlement with Amway. They can't use cuss words and things of that nature. But if you want to call me, the worst person you've ever met, I will post that comment. I will gladly do that.
Scott is ready. Anybody stepping up? I'm sure Omar would love to.
I'm sure he would.
Anyway.
Well, the interesting thing about this is severalfold, because this is a multi-dimensional, if you will, conversation. Relative to the Facebook posts and stuff like that, your post, Scott, that you were telling me about the person whose name is it's tongue-in-cheek, it's Elbow. So if you want to look for it, it's ELLE, and then Bow is in BEAU. So it's obviously tongue-in-cheek relative to the name.
Okay.
But she was shut down because of a lot of complaints, I'm guessing. Then, Scott, I had forwarded you an article about how Rodan and Fields terminated, get this, Rodan and Fields terminates a woman based on her outside activities. She's a woman who is probably not nice. We don't have her version of the story here, but she she's a white woman who basically picked on a few black teenagers and said some derogatory things, like she called them punks. And enough people, as far as these shills and these trolls like you're referencing, Tanster, wrote about that, and we're saying, well, she's a Rodan and Fields representative. What kind of company is Rodan and Fields if they allow people like this? And she was actually terminated from Rodan and Fields based on her stupidity of acting the way she did and was filmed. So it's obviously a bad move for her. But she was basically fired by her network marketing company based on her activities around the pool, on the single-sided story that we heard from these couple of black teenagers. We never saw what happened before or afterwards, but the reality was that she was called racist and blah, 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 blah. But this is the power of social media, good, bad, or whatever. So it's kind of crazy.
Absolutely.
So let me, because I don't want to talk, we want to kind of cover some MLM stuff on this one. So, Tanster, when is the lie detector test, or is one set up, or will one be set up? When will that happen, and will you let us know?
All right. Well, we don't have a date yet. I very carefully chose a private investigator with 30 years experience, someone who lives near Ben in Seattle. So we were really careful, because the credibility of the polygraph examiner is everything, obviously.
Sure.
So, Omar Rosales dug really deep, okay? Or maybe someone who was exactly like Omar Rosales. I'm not sure if it was him, of course, but someone like that said that this private investigator had been discredited. And then he sent us the link, okay? And since we have a lawyer on our team, we had our lawyer look at it, and that was another lie. Because if you read the whole case, the upshot is that the court trusted our private investigator. It's a big, long, convoluted story, but the court actually had our private investigator on the stand as their witness. So we didn't even know that.
Right. What do you think is going to be in the next couple of weeks? Next couple of weeks or next couple of months? When do you think?
Next couple of weeks. I just said I'm going to mail you a check and, let it clear, and then we'll figure it out, very, very loose. And Ben does have a background in making videos, so he feels very certain that he can produce a video. He is expressing some interest in having some sort of impartial witness. We don't know about that yet. So that's the plan. We want a video, and I think we got a really good PI.
Excellent. Okay, good.
I think we're going to get the truth here,
Yep.
Go ahead, Peter.
Well, let's move on to some other stuff because I don't want to. Some of our customers want to hear about what's going on in the MLM world as well. So, Tanster, thanks for everything you're doing. We'll have you come back and help us with more stuff that's going on relative to this because now I'm curious. You know what I mean? Now it's like soap opera for me.
It's a great story. I'm always on your side.
Yep, and we're going to check it out. So for those people listening in, if you want to follow, there's two websites I think you would go to follow. One of them is going to be thetanster.com, as in T-H-E, Tanster, Tanster.com, and then the other one is frankreport.com if you want to learn more about NXIVM.
Oh, yeah, Frank Report.
Get a little bit more information. Alrighty, so listen in, Tanster, you hold on 1 second. We have about 15 minutes left, Scott, or so. Let's go over some of the things in the news that are happening in the MLM world so Tanster can hear some of the regular stuff that we do. So what's new in the MLM world, Scott? Yep. So, Scott, what's new in the MLM world?
Well, I guess the interesting thing for me this past week is I was just channel flipping, and I'm channel flipping through CNBC, the show called American Greed. I was about halfway into it, the 1 hour show, and I thought, well, this is interesting because this particular story is about a company that we've talked about before, Peter, called Telex Free. They were shut down a few years ago. It was just a big, huge scam. People were paying all kinds of money and not getting much back for it, and the government shut it down. One of the co-founders was sentenced to 6 years in prison. The other one fled to Brazil, where he's from. We don't know if he's going to be extradited back or not. There was some rumors he might be, but we don't know. But the real upshot is after maybe about three-quarters of the show, the thing that really caught my attention was they were talking about the whole process, and what happened was these Telex Free guys were going around going, oh yeah, this is the greatest thing, and Brazil clamped down on it, and then the United States SEC, Security and Exchange Commission, they send a letter to the Telex Free guys, the owners, saying, hey, we're looking into you too. It looks like you're not selling any products here. You're just having people pay money in, and it's just a big, illegal pyramid type situation. And so what they did was they immediately changed their process. Telex Free did, and they told all their distributors, okay, guys, things have changed. We're in trouble. We need you to go out there and start selling your voice over IP stuff. And what happened, literally, was there was an uprising. Mm-hmm. There was literally a march on headquarters, and people were complaining, you can't expect us to sell this stuff. And it wasn't long after that the government actually clamped down and shut them down very soon after that. But it was just kind of funny because, we talk about this almost every week, Peter, that the big problem with most MLMs, or at least most MLMs that I know about, and most people within those MLMs, and there's always exceptions, but by and large, an MLM that consistently has a lot of retail sales is very difficult to find. And I can imagine, maybe not exactly the same reaction, but a similar reaction if any MLM went out and told their people overnight, okay, now you got to start selling stuff. We're in trouble. Because we saw that with Vima. Right. I mean, that's how we got together was Vima, and Vima wasn't doing hardly any retail sales. And then the final settlement required a distributor to have at least 51% of sales going to customers, not their downline, but real customers, or else they wouldn't get paid any bonus. And we saw the same thing, I should say similar thing, with Herbalife recently. A couple of years ago, there was a settlement where they had to sell at least 2 out of 3 dollars had to go to outside customers, or else they wouldn't get paid their full bonus. So, I mean, that's a really big issue that we know about because the FTC has ruled on it. I wish they would do it more industry-wide versus picking off a company here and there, because there's literally hundreds of companies like that behaving in this way. But anyway, I thought that was just really, I mean, I literally laughed out loud when I saw that because, you know, once an MLM tells their people, okay, you got to sell, it's pretty obvious they're not doing that now, or else they wouldn't have had a mark on the headquarters. So,
that's it.
Now, what I also did, go ahead and comment on that, Peter and Tanster, but I want to say one more thing about that story real quick when you comment. Go ahead.
No, I'm okay with it because I didn't see the CNBC report or the CNBC show, but just the idea that it did make it to that level is somewhat extraordinary. So back to you. Yeah.
So the other thing I did was you can actually watch the show. I mean, you can look at your TV guide or whatever, your programming schedule, and see when it's going to be on again on CNBC, or you can go to cnbc.com and look for American Greed and look for that episode. It's titled $1 Billion Fraud Goes Viral. That's the title of the show. And you have to have, I think you have to have either satellite or cable, because you have to put in your information, like your name and your account number or something, because it's one of these things you can watch the show, but you have to have an existing cable package to be able to do that. If you want to look at it live, you know, as you're watching it online. But what was the other shocking thing was the other flip side of this is I'm watching the show from the beginning, because I started only halfway through when I was flipping channels before. Within about 5 or 6 minutes, they had this SEC attorney general or something, some big shot in Boston where this thing was located, and he was commenting how, you know, it was pretty obvious that that Telex Free was a illegal pyramid or a Ponzi or whatever, and, you know, they really didn't sell any products. They just had people paying money in and attracting new people to keep paying money in, and that's basically how they made money. And they also encouraged them not to take the money out, because obviously if people started doing that, they would have had more things they had to pay versus the money they had on hand. And so that's why they encourage people to keep their money in it. You know, hey, if you double it, next month you're going to double it again. Just think how rich you're going to be. But anyways, he's going through all of this stuff. As he's going through all this stuff, he goes, you know, so this was not a legitimate MLM. Now, there are legitimate MLMs out there. Take Amway, for example. They've been around a long time. I just about fell out of my chair going, you just blew it with me, because I know that Amway has very little retail sales. And this guy is, number one, he's clueless, because he doesn't understand what an illegal pyramid is. And number two, he's giving credibility to Amway, and they do not deserve it. They're the biggest MLM on the planet, and therefore the biggest MLM scam on the planet. And he just gave him credibility, and I just couldn't believe he did that.
I mean, if you don't mind my saying this,
go ahead.
I think a lot of people are paid to say certain things, and this guy is telling a whole story, and you know, the silver lining is that Amway's all right, and that's what I'm talking about with these so-called truthers on YouTube. Is they're paid to tell this whole story, and then they mix in these things that aren't true. And people are like, oh, I can trust this guy. You know, I've been watching his channel for years. So when he slips the little thing in there, like, you know, Amway's all right. And I can, you know, the more you are tuned to spot it, you can see it. When they slip the lie in right between the truth.
Yeah, and that might be true. It might be planned like that, but I have to believe in my own opinion. This is just my opinion. I think the guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I think he's ignorant, and I don't mean that. I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, he just doesn't understand. He just doesn't understand. And you can go actually back to the SEC website. The SEC website does talk about illegal pyramids, and it doesn't talk about lack of retail sales. It talks about if you have to pay money to join, then that's an indication of an illegal pyramid. And by the way, it is, but it doesn't stop there. It's also if you have a lack of retail sales, and that's where even the SEC website is very much wanting as far as accuracy. And the FTC website does a much better job of saying, hey, if you don't have a lot of retail sales, you're an illegal pyramid. And so I do think there's an organizational ignorance and certainly an individual ignorance, at the very least, going on here. But I was shocked that he said that. If he had just said there's a legitimate MLMs out there and moved on, I would have, said, okay, great. But he mentioned the Amway word, and I just, I just fell out of my chair almost. So.
Right. Then that person's not credible, because that's not true.
Right. Oh, exactly. Yeah. At the very least, he's ignorant.
So important.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
It's not good either way. It's not good.
Yeah. It doesn't matter which way it is. It's not good. You're exactly right.
Right. Exactly.
So, well, I got one for you. I got one for you, Scott. I got one for you, Scott, and Tanster. You will like this one, and I'd appreciate your feedback. You can't give me feedback on it now because you don't know what it is yet, but I'd like your feedback maybe the next time we take a look at it. We've always loved our great friend. His name is David Wood. So as an artist and as somebody who thinks at different levels, maybe you might be able to correct us. You might come back and say, no, this guy is really okay. But I'm not thinking so. So anyway, David Wood had a 2-hour, multiple-hour rant, if you will. Many people didn't know that he, of course, folded Empower Network and then told the truth about how, kind of like we were putting out products just for the sake of selling products. It was a really big scam. Like we were kind of bullshitting all you guys. Then a lot of people don't know this, though. I didn't really pay attention. He might have said it in one of his little rants before, but he had joined World Ventures. So World Ventures is a company that's, Scott, I think it even might be by you. And they have some different and various challenges themselves. They were deemed an illegal pyramid in some European countries, I think. I think they're still fighting it through appeals and stuff like that. But Dave Wood was terminated by World Ventures a week or two ago, and then Dave Wood melted down again on a 2-hour or so rant about how like fire and fury, and he was putting spells and whammies on all the people, and they were gonna die, and there were gonna be people. It was gonna be like basically a bloodbath, and bad things were gonna happen, and the world was going to turn upside down and all this other stuff. So he really carried on for a really long time. So anyway, so it's an interesting little rant that you would just want to take, not just you, but anybody would probably just want to take a look at and say, wow, this guy's kind of whacked. But from,
I will absolutely check it out.
That's right. So, Scott, maybe if you can find the Dave Wood rants, we can get one to Tanster, and she could look at this guy and say,
I am always interested in a good rant.
Oh, yeah, this guy's really good at it. So anyway, so that was one thing. On a more serious note, and I'll just throw in, let Scott take the next one after this, there's been a couple of companies that have been in trouble, and one that's closed down just recently. So one was a direct sales company, which was an MLM company, more along the party line plan, called Jamberry Nails. So they were like a darling for a little bit. There was 3 gals in a garage kind of a story that started selling nail wraps, and one thing led to another, and they sold a lot of nail wraps, and then sold a lot more nail wraps, and a lot of people were very interested. And they did really well for a really long time, and then all of a sudden, they just unwound, and they've unwound and completely gone out of business, more or less. Might be picked up by another company as well. And it's not a traditional MLM, but it really did appeal to the gals. So if one of the things that I found was I did a YouTube search for, Jamberry Nails closing or Jamberry Nails, why do I leave Jamberry? And a lot of gals, as a recruiting mechanism, when they leave a company, they make a YouTube video, why I left Unique, or why I left Jamberry Nails. So it's very interesting to see why they left different companies and, why they might be promoting something else. But just a little bit of just an interesting thing. I did run across one woman who had a very interesting spin on why she was leaving Jamberry Nails, and she was a dietitian. So she left about a week before the final announcement. And now, there's different people that do different things in our industry. Some of the people that said they left Jamberry Nails, I think need some mental help as well. Because they would say things like, I really didn't feel good when I was lying to all of my downline. But since I still had my downline, I really was torn. I'm like, well, wait a minute. Like, if you know you're lying, it shouldn't matter how big your downline is. Like, if you know you're lying, you know you're lying. How in the world can you say, I was really torn that I had to continue lying to my downline? I'm like, okay, so there's a little bit of, you need to see somebody for a little bit of mental therapy for that. But there was one gal who really exemplified, I think, why people, like good people, do network marketing, and why some people maybe sometimes make the decisions she did. And I wish I remember the gal's name, but I don't think you need it. But if you go, like, do a YouTube search, this one woman was a dietitian first, and she loved the Jamberry nails, and she figured that she'd be able to sell some to her friends, and she built a pretty big organization, and she probably helped coach a lot of people in her business, and she seemed like a very nice person. And then she said, when I found out that Jamberry Nails was going to be working with a network marketing company that had a nutritional supplement line, I had to leave. And she basically said, the reason why I had to leave was because as a dietitian, I don't think ordinary people should be talking about and educating people about health and nutrition, because really that should probably be done by a doctor or maybe somebody who's got a little bit more education than somebody who just fills out an application.
We'd all prefer someone who knows what they're talking about.
So it was a really, it was a really good video of somebody that had some real integrity. So when you look at it and you say, you know, these are the kind of people that do MLM, I really was, I will say proud, not that she needs my permission or my acknowledgement,
That's good.
but I was really very happy to see that woman took that stance, even if the company was going to stay in business, because of her personal beliefs.
Exactly.
And even though she was away from a pretty big portion of what she just devoted her whole entire life to. However, one of the things that I think are important is, for most people to listen in and learn, is that just because you're a distributor, they say that you're building your own home-based business and that you own your own home-based business. You only own your own home-based business if the company stays in business. So if you're a distributor with a company and they go out of business or they make some decisions that violate your personal opinions, then, you know, what was it worth all along? So I just wanted to mention that as well, Scott. So I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, and actually, Peter, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I was talking to a woman earlier this afternoon, not the Tanster, somebody else, and I won't say her name or anything, but it does involve NXIVM. But it was interesting because during the course of our conversation, she mentioned that she was really upset about all this sex slave and underage sex, all this crazy stuff that's going on in NXIVM. But she also told me something that's similar to what you just said, Peter, and that is she really doesn't care if some people scam other people. She really wasn't too concerned about that. That was acceptable to her, and that's very unacceptable to me. That's very unacceptable to me. I mean, that's really the foundation of this entire radio show for almost 3 years. Is I'm not okay with people scamming. I mean, that there are laws against that. It's called fraud and those kinds of things. But it was interesting. It was interesting you mentioned that she didn't care if she was lying to her downline, because there are those people out there that, you know, I guess the money is bigger than, you know, being honest or something, and certainly,
some people,
the more severe crime was worse in her eyes, and she just didn't care about the more minor, in her mind, minor crime. To me, a crime's a crime, and sure, there's some that are worse than others, but it doesn't mean you drop one because there's something that's even worse going on. So it was just kind of a weird conversation, but it was interesting you mentioned that, and then I had that conversation earlier with somebody. So I guess we're up against our hour here, or maybe a little bit past our hour. Peter, did you want to keep going or wrap it up?
If you have some other interesting ones, we can keep going for a few more minutes.
Well, you mentioned World Ventures, and I just came across a story on one of our favorite websites in Tanster. I don't know if we've mentioned this to you, but there's a website out there that is very good at digging up news about MLMs, and it's called BehindMLM.com. So it's just like it sounds, BehindMLM.com. It's all one word behind MLM. And these guys do an incredible job of just finding MLM developments and news. And there's one dated yesterday, June 29th, 2018, and the title is MAVI overturns World Ventures temporary restraining order. And you had brought up World Ventures earlier in reference to Dave Wood, Peter, and I think we covered this a couple weeks ago, that World Ventures tried to get a temporary restraining order on one or two other companies because they claimed they had stolen their people or their ideas or something. That went to a court hearing and essentially got overturned. I mean, the lawsuit's still on, but the judge said, no, you don't have enough here to do a restraining order. We're just going to keep going like we were before until the trial. So we'll see how that works out, but it's definitely a big setback, I think, for World Ventures, which is, by the way, headquartered in Plano, Texas, where I live. In fact, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, I went to our Plano Chamber of Commerce going, hey, there's hundreds of MLM scams out there. The reason I'm coming to you about World Ventures is they're in the organization in Plano, Texas, as far as the, a good business, basically. They're basically giving them credibility by allowing them to join their business community. And I didn't get very far because, again, I think that these organizations are more interested in getting people to pay their dues and their fees than they are seeing if they're really operating a legitimate business. But I thought that was an interesting story, how that temporary restraining order got overturned pretty quickly. There wasn't much delay from the judge. He said, we're going to not do anything until the trial starts. So I thought that was interesting. I'll let you guys comment.
Yeah, a lot of these things end up in court. Your issue with Amway ended up, you settled out of court, right?
Yes. Yep.
Right.
And the settlement is on my website.
I actually got sued by the cult that I was exposing. And it's so funny that the person that hates Ben so much is a lawyer who would go around doing frivolous lawsuits. So there's such a pattern about frivolous lawsuits here.
Yeah, right. And I don't remember I don't remember the details of the TRO, but I think what made the restraining the TRO a little bit different is the companies are not implicated, but the people associated with that are still maybe under the TRO, and we're really not sure what's going on with that. And a little bit of full disclosure, I don't know that much about World Ventures, but there was a gentleman that used to teach at, actually, he didn't teach at the University of Illinois in Chicago. There's a gentleman that I know who's a trainer for World Ventures who travels the world, and I asked him if he would join us on maybe one of our radio shows to kind of discuss some of those issues that are out there. He's a real good guy. He's an excellent trainer. He's not a sociopath. He's just like a real good guy.
Oh, good.
So that he's doing stuff, training with them. There might be some parts of the story that I'd like to hear because it's inconsistent that he would be working with a company that would not be a good company. So we'll see.
Right.
So that's I got a message out for him. Maybe we'll find out some more stuff, and that's what we really want to do. We want to find both sides. So back to other stuff. Oh, let's see. Scott, was there anything else? This is just more gossip than anything else. I was listening to a radio show by Tom Chenault, and he had Kevin Thompson on as an MLM attorney on the radio show, and Kevin didn't go to the ANMP, which stands for the Association of Network Marketing Professionals, mostly because, according to him, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, I might not have it exactly right, but mostly because he didn't believe he wanted to be on stage with some of the other people. Specifically, the gentleman we throw under the bus all the time, Ted Knighton, who runs businessforhome.org. Get this, Scott. Now, I was not at the ANMP convention, but I heard that they gave him a lifelong achievement kind of award for what he does for businessforhome.org. And I said to myself, how in the world could anybody who basically is a shill and a paid shill for the people that are willing to pay him in this industry, specifically with OneCoin, which made, by the way, Telex Free look small and the number of people that they scam, how in the world could they give Ted Knighton a humanitarian quote-unquote or achievement award for helping out the industry? And that's one of the reasons why Kevin Thompson didn't go speak at the ANMP convention. And Chenault was basically, put in a position where he kind of had to defend the ANMP, like, well, they really didn't think it through very much, and they're going to make sure that stuff never happens again. But the answer was, although I have mixed feelings about Kevin Thompson and some of the things he's done before, he gained some brownie points on my side because of what he said relative to what the ANMP had done. So I figured that would be worth mentioning as well. So even the companies that are supposed to have the credibility of organizations like the ANMP, how in the world could they give any achievement award to Ted Knighton for anything that he does? He's a paid shill. Go for it.
Maybe the awards are there just to give credibility to liars.
Right.
I mean, didn't Obama get the Nobel Peace Prize? Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was before he actually did anything.
What's the Peace Prize? A Nobel Peace Prize about that? Okay.
Yeah, that was right after he was elected. I think it was in 2009. He hadn't done anything yet.
Look at who gets the awards. Right, the worst people get the awards. It's true.
That's often true. In fact, just to add to that Kevin Thompson thing, because I do appreciate that he didn't go and he has some scruples. I have to give him credit where credit's due, but he said a couple things in that interview that really irked me. One was he said, because there's a Republican administration now, as long as you've got a return policy, you shouldn't have any problem with the FTC. It doesn't matter if you have any retail sales or not, because they're not going to be concerned about that. They're only going to go after the really really bad actors that don't have a good return policy. And I just felt that whole discussion was way off base, because number one, the FTC is just an organization within the government, and certainly I would say an administration would influence what they do, but they're not going to just totally pull back or pull forward their driving force. And the thing that I really got upset was when he said, you really don't have to be concerned about retail sales because the FTC doesn't really think that they can separate why a distributor buys a product. That if the distributor buys the product because they really like it, then that should be treated the same thing as a retail sale. And the FTC doesn't want to try to cut that fine line, but they have cut that fine line. They've always done that over the years. The FTC has always ignored the motivation of the distributor buying the product, and they've always said you got to have at least half of your sales going to non-distributors. There's no motivation part of the process there. It's all very cut and dry, very straightforward. You either got the retail sales or you don't. If you got them, you're a legitimate MLM. If you don't, you're an illegal pyramid. It's very clear.
You've been listening to Building Fortunes Radio on buildingfortunesradio.com. Thanks for listening. Be sure to check us out every Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time for the designated Building Fortunes Radio segment with Peter Mingles. Be sure to check out the buildingfortunesradio.com website for our featured segments. It's been our privilege to have you listen in. At Building Fortunes Radio, we wish you the success you deserve and are willing to work for. So spread the word, tell a friend, join our newsletter, and go make a difference in your world.